Yes, it just started. So whenever you're ready, feel free to start, sir.
Yeah, we are ready. Are there some more participants expected?
Yeah, there will be a few joining in, so we can start at 4:1 in 1 minute.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so should we start?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this fireside chat organized by the Supply Chain Practitioners Council, SCPC. And I have a pleasure in welcoming Ashita Mittal, who is the Site Unit Director at Hindustan Unilever. Ashita has 18 years of supply chain experience, and she has worked with leading FMCG companies like Nestle, Johnson and Johnson, and Unilever. And she has handled various types of roles. Some of these are production-related roles, what are known as make roles, and some are non-make roles in planning, etc. Basically, an electronics and instrumentation engineer, and later she specialized in supply chain from the Premier Institute, NITI, Mumbai. So today's fireside chat is on how do we leverage automation and digitization in supply chain. So welcome, Ashita, to the fireside chat.
So, first of all, thank you, sir, for giving this platform to share my experiences. And also, it's a privilege to interact with a supply chain stalwart and a senior from NITI. So, the pleasure is mine.
Thanks, Ashita. So tell us, Ashita, something about your career and when did you first encounter this topic of digitization and automation, which is the in thing now. Everyone is talking about it. When did you first encounter it in your career?
So I passed out from NITI in 2005, and which is when I started working.
Yeah.
And I started working in the planning side of supply chain.
Yeah.
And this is when I first experienced digitization. So at that point of time, there were local ERPs in the organization, and we were moving to global SAP systems. So, we learned how do we have to standardize the SKU codes, how, the data has to get into big servers. As a demand planner, which I started working on as my first stint, we were earlier using only Excel for forecasting. So after these global ERP SAP system implementations, we started using APO for forecasting. So, but while I experienced digitization in large part of my career during planning, I experienced automation more closely when I took up the current role as a factory director, sir.
Yeah, so you're right. In fact, standardization is extremely important. I remember when we integrated all our businesses in Africa, we acquired a major business in Africa across several countries. And when we integrated it in the year 2010, we had 2010 or 2011. So we had a lot of challenges because the same SKU was known by different codes and different event descriptions. So how do you synchronize? How do you harmonize those definitions? It was a big job. So I'm sure you would have also faced these challenges. Tell us in this digitization space over the last 18 years, in your opinion, what has changed from that time to now? It's a big journey over 18 years.
Yeah. So I'll primarily, let's say, talk about the planning systems. When we
Yeah.
were, we started out, thankfully there was no pen and paper. There was, basic Excel being used. So in your times, maybe you would have seen even pen and paper being used for planning. And then people would have started using, some softwares, I'm sure. But in our times, at least, Excel was existing. Then we moved to SAP APO. For a large part of the time, I think till around 2015, 2016, we were using primarily SAP APO. There were, some tools where the algorithms were slightly better, but the main system was APO. Around 2017 is when I started hearing about, machine learning based forecasting, and how these models can play a role in terms of these improvements. So we started experimenting. I was in another organization at that point of time. I was with Johnson & Johnson. We were experimenting with these machine learning algorithms. Then in 2021 is when we started moving beyond machine learning to also artificial intelligence in planning, where we were not just kind of looking at recommendations from the system, but also systems which could actually ride back. So the whole transition or the journey, I would say, from experimenting, delivering, making those changes, which then became everyday planning tools for these. So each of these different tools that we implemented, they went through this phases. I think one big difference that has happened over these years is the ability of these systems or tools to ingest data and then process data. So that's, I think, a big difference. The other difference which has come in this space is that they are becoming more user friendly. Earlier, when the tools that we were using, let's say SAP APO, if we were supposed to get one change done in that transaction or in that model, it used to take, if not years, but at least a few months, because they used to gather the requirement from multiple countries, multiple locations. There were only dedicated few people who really knew about how to make those changes. And it was very difficult for the end users to kind of, use them. What now I see is the interactive systems. They are much more user friendly when we are using them. So two main things which have, primarily changed. One is the ability of these systems to kind of take in more data, ingest, and the cognitive abilities that they have. And the second difference is, I think they've become more user friendly. I would also want to mention what hasn't changed. I think what hasn't changed is the cycle that people go through when they are using these tools. So whenever some new tool or digitization project kind of comes in, while there'll be people who will be leading and will be super enthusiastic about it, they'll be saying this is what this problem it will solve for. But people will be actually using it, they will start off by saying this might not work, this might be just a fancy experiment. And second, they start experimenting themselves. They have some frustration. They keep on using a parallel system. And then finally, the integration happens. So irrespective of the tool, I think I've seen this journey of people, that's been kind of consistent over the years. The cycle time might have reduced, but, the cycle remains the same. So.
Yeah, so that must have been quite interesting to watch this evolution over a period of time. And when you say that during my time must have been paper and pen, you make me sound old. So, but that's true, because I remember in my final year when we did the project, 6 month project at NITI in the last semester, we didn't have PCs. PCs were invented after that. So we had only the mini computers and the mainframes. And for our project work, we used to go to TIFR to run our codes on their mini computers. and we had to punch cards and feed those punch cards into the mini computer. So those were the days. And I don't know whether you remember, when you started working, the first thing you saw on the screen was MS DOS Tuesday 1180.
Yeah.
So that used to come as the first line, that Tuesday 1180, and I passed out in 1980. So PCs really came in after that. Forget about Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. Even PCs were not there at that time. But yeah, things have changed
Interesting.
a lot.
Yeah, just a question, sir, on this maybe. When you started working,
Yeah,
so were there PCs or there was only pen and paper?
there was pen and paper, and
Hmm.
there were mainframe computers in
Okay.
the company. And when PC started, I remember initially I wrote some program in DBase,
Huh.
and that was really because the main languages that time were Basic, then mm, Fortran for the scientific works, or LP program used to be in Fortran. Uh, and then DBS came, which had a much easier user interface. And I remember writing a program for the weighted average costing calculation for all the products.
Huh.
And that was written entirely in DBase. That was way back in 2004, sorry, 1984 or 1985 at that time. But later on,
Wow.
yeah, C, C++, or Python, and all these came much, much later. So,
Hmm.
yeah. So Ashita, tell us, how does one really undertake this digital or automation journey? There are many people who want to implement digitization, but there are so many alternatives, and it looks very confusing to newcomers. So, how
Hmm.
should one get into this journey? And if you can share some key learnings or success factors
Hmm.
in this
Yeah, I
one.
think it's a pertinent question, because everyone will say we'll have to digitize, we have to use
Yeah,
automation, but how do you kind of start or go about it, and how do you ensure it is successful? I think one thing which might seem like a broken record, and which is must for any transformation, is a top management commitment. So if you don't have top management commitment, I think you might not be able to have success in these initiatives, because the journey is very challenging. It's never easy. It requires a lot of important decisions along the way when you're implementing. These decisions might be like approving monies for scope which is not factored in initially, putting in more resources or lesser resources, or even taking a hard call of something that is not working in the project, and taking a decision of not going further. So the first important bit is the top management commitment, on how they are kind of committed on these initiatives. Second thing, in my experience, is a lot of time we kind of get excited with the solutions that are there in the market, and then we try and find out problems for them within our system. I think it should be the other way around. We need to map out. So we need to have our own strategy, which is linked to the business of what we really want. What are our problems, both current and the potential ones which we see? Because if you just kind of
yeah,
limit yourself to the current problems, you might have very short-term solutions. So you need to look at both. What are your current set of challenges or problems? And then what are the potential ones that you foresee in the next few years? And then start exploring the digital or the automation solutions which are available in the market. So there might be solutions which are readily available within or outside the organization that you can use, or you might also have to, you need to reach out to an expert to develop a new solution for you. I can share a few examples in this case. I remember when we were trying to implement machine learning based forecasting, a lot of people kind of got excited saying, now let's do machine learning based forecasting for all our SKUs, the entire portfolio. But machine learning based forecasting is required when you have really huge amount of data. There's a lot of complexity. There are a lot of events that impact your focus. So if you don't have many SQs or events, even traditional forecasting methods can give you a very good forecasting accuracy. So you need to look at your impact and effort all the time and decide on what makes sense for the function unit or the organization. Another example I can share is, we tend to get excited. If someone saw a humanoid video working in a warehouse, and then you say, okay, let me kind of automate my warehouse. But given the stage you might be in your warehousing journey, a basic WMS system can give you much better unlock, both in productivity and cost, before you decide on experimenting the humanoid. So I'm not saying we should not experiment, but there should be a balance between experimenting and then solving for your problems through these existing solutions. So those were the two ones. The third one, I think, as a critical success factor is, you know, and which is where I think a lot of projects face this challenge, that people think that maximum effort is required in making something live. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. People who make the project live, they receive the accolades. Everyone says fantastic work done. It was difficult. We had to, collect a lot of data, use a lot of new tools. We had people coming from external world to help us out, and now, we've got the solution and we've implemented it. I'll be honest with my experiences. It's actually the easier one. So when you're working on a project, during that time, you have the resources, you have the budgets, you have the time allocated. But once it is live, it's actually left to the end users. And now is where, now this time when it is live for the end users, it's actually being tested because it goes to large number of users. And this is where support is required. So one-time training doesn't help with people. They need on-ground support. They need mindset change. They also need version changes. So, but at that point of time, the project team, vanishes because they have to work on another project, bringing another project to life. They've given birth to a child, but equal time and energy is also required to grow the child. So ensure that support is there. So that's the third one. And I think the last one, which is the most important and actually the toughest one, is people. You might have a fantastic tool, yeah, or a fantastic solution, but if you haven't taken your people along in that journey, it won't work for you. So they are the key. Ensure they are part of the project in the design stage itself. You just cannot be dependent on outsiders or experts who will be implementing these solutions for you. You need to have people who know your business, working with these experts to design your tool. And then when you're launching it, involve them, listen to them, what they are saying, so that eventually when they're using it, they are able to use it and it gives business benefits as well. So kind of summarizing the four key successful factors for any of these projects. And I think it is not just for digitization and automation, it is for any transformation. So first of all is the top management commitment. Second one, look for solutions for your problems, not the other way around. Third, ensure equal, if not more energies are spent when you go live with end users to make the project successful. And the last one and the most important one is, having your people both upskilled and having a mindset that they will be able to bring in business benefits with this implementation.
Absolutely, Ashita. And two of the points actually resonate very well. Uh, Look for solutions for problems and not really a tool. Uh, you're right that many people hear about a particular tool, they want to implement it, and then they are looking for places where it can be implemented. I've seen a lot of it being done for, say, things like IoT, robotics, computer vision. We can implement computer vision, so let's find out where it will pay maximum value. So that's absolutely right. It's like having a hammer and then looking for nail. So, yeah, and the second thing is about going live is not the biggest thing. Those of us who have implemented ERP would know. The day you go live, actually, for the first few days, things look very rosy, but real problems start after a week or so. When you see that the many of the data is not getting updated, or the output is not in line with what we expected. I remember in one particular instance, I was involved in two ERP implementations. Firstly, the decentralized ERP of MMC Pro that we implemented in 1996, and then switched over to SAP in 2007. So there are at times issues with data format. I remember because in numeric format, you have two options. In some countries, you use comma, and some countries, you use decimal point, dot. And if you mix these two, then the numbers don't make sense really. So we had an issue that in one of the countries, we had used the wrong format, and everything was coming out in millions or million times whatever we expected. And then we realized that in that country, the data format needs to be different. So these nuances really, so you do miss out on some of these nuances even during the trial phase. But yeah, so going live is not the end of implementing a project. How you carry it forward, how you nurture it, and you mentioned it very well, like nurturing your children. It takes a lot of effort after going live to really ensure that you get all the benefits from the initiative. Yeah, so you did mention about top management commitment, absolutely important, and people upskilling as well. Many a times, people want to, employees in the middle management or lower management, they want to implement some initiatives, but they get stuck on the budgets. And how do they work in that scenario? How do they convince the top management? How do they get the budgets for the initiatives that they want to implement?
Yeah, it's a real life challenge, and we experience it so many times. So I have had both successful attempts of convincing my finance teams or business teams, and also the unsuccessful attempts of
Yeah, yeah.
convincing, or not being able to convince the business teams, because a lot of time they might just come and tell you, this is such a fancy toy that you're wasting companies money on. But I think why it's kind of important for you to kind of ensure and to tell them is that you are solving a business problem. You're not again implementing a tool, but it's part of the business strategy. It's a problem that you've identified, and then these are the solutions which can possibly solve for it. So you need to ensure it's a mix. So ensure your business solutions, or these solutions that you're, giving, uh, most of them potentially have yielded results or should be justified with a clear business benefit, because you cannot have, everything which is kind of experimental. So, scaling up what is available in the market. The second bit is about having that appetite for risk. So if you're able to have a percentage, so if you're able to kind of convince them that this is what I'm going to deliver in terms of business benefits by doing this particular project, but a small percentage I want to I want to experiment with, saying this might be a risk by calling it out beforehand. So, you need to tell them that this project, I'm very clear, will give me these clear business benefits. But there's another project which might be high risk, it might be high benefit, but it can also kind of fail. So then at least you're making it very clear to everyone that you're experimenting with this. It's like, portfolio game that we do for our own investments. Uh, you have FDs, you have equities, and then you also have something like, crypto. So if you go all digital, and tell your teams, okay, I'm going to invest everything in crypto, nobody is going to give you the money. And but you cannot continue to be only invested in your fixed deposits, because they might not give you great returns, which is why you need to play the portfolio game even here. Have your FDs which are going to give you a fixed return, have your equities kind of solutions which are going to be some medium risk and medium returns, and then some part of the portfolio which is experimental. So as long as you make these things very clear to your business partners, I think then they are able to, allocate those monies to you, because you're making your expectation very clear. So even when a few experimental projects fail, yes, and they will, which is why the top management commitment is required. You might try out many things. When those few things fail, they don't, say the entire initiative has failed. They say, okay, this is what you tried out. It didn't work, but absolutely fine. But the rest of the things work. So play your portfolio game when you're trying to convince your business. Ensure it's part of the business strategy, and I'm sure you'll be able to get monies both for, implementing readily available solutions, and also some bit for experimentation.
Yeah. So for experimentation, is it more of like a leap of faith?
Yes, I would say it's a leap of faith. It's not like something which you will be able to justify or have a return on paper. There are few things which you'll have to take leap of faith. So definitely.
Okay, just one more side question. How do you make a business case? Is it like a typical cost benefit analysis? I've also heard people say that cost benefit analysis is passé. So what do you feel?
For all, I'll say majority of our digitization and automation projects, at least what I've been part of or what I have led, 90% of them is what we call as IRR projects, which have, returned. It might be in a longer period of time, because the business teams or the finance team will never give you those approvals. But 10% of them have been experimental, where, it's an NRR saying, we will try with that and it might not yield the return. So I've had both cases, but again, 90-10 or 80-20 has been the ratio. But majority of the cases, you need to, give confidence to the business that it will be giving a business benefit.
Yeah. I also seen that people who start with, say, a particular tool, as you mentioned, some people say that this tool should be implemented. They typically start with cost of the tool and then look at the benefits and whether benefits justify the cost or not. On the other hand, people who are willing to solve their problems, they start the other way around. They start with the benefit. What benefit will I
Yes.
get? And then calculate what's the cost of providing it. So which one do you think is better, and what should the listeners take away from that?
Start with the benefit. I'm telling you your costs. You can never kind of, get it 100% right there, because your scope might get added. There might be resource allocation that is required. So start with the benefit. And I'm sure, the cost plus or minus, you will be able to kind of justify. Don't look at it the other way around, where you look at the cost first and then try and work out the business benefit, Doctor.
Yeah. So should we really call it a benefit cost analysis rather than a cost benefit analysis? That will put
Maybe
people in the right frame of mind.
maybe we'll need to do that and call it a benefit cost thing.
Yeah. So BCA rather than CV.
CBA.
Okay. Okay. Tell us a few examples where you implemented something, you had certain expectations, and what you ended up far exceeded your expectations. And some cases where it didn't really meet up with the expectations or the entire initiative failed. Just a few anecdotes.
Yeah, it's again like I mentioned, your portfolio game where, stocks that, you might not have expected them to perform. They did, but, the others did not. So I'll share a few examples. I think the first one is of an internal data reporting system, and it was a few years back. So we already had SCP reports, the BW reports, and we had also, moved to Power BI. Our finance teams, they introduced this new cloud-based system where we could actually, type in search, and it would give us data or information from multiple sources with visualization, in if not a few seconds, but let's say between 30 seconds to a minute. So as an example, I could type, sales market share of sanitizers in Punjab 2019 at month level. So now this data was already there, which was existing in our system, and it was being visualized as well. But what this tool gave us was that it gave this data as per the user requirement in 30 seconds, which would otherwise could have taken hours. And also it was very, very user friendly. So it was not just then used by the functional teams, but also by business teams who actually used to be otherwise dependent on the functional teams. So it really superseded the expectations which we had. In fact, it was a tool which was not even developed by us or our functional team, not by supply chain. It was a finance tool, and then the entire organization starting using this tool because it was much faster and interactive, and it gave data from multiple sources, really quickly. The other example maybe I would want to share is an example where things didn't work out for us. It's an example of an SNOP application. So we developed this SNOP application where what it did was when you're doing forecasting and you have to run your SNOP, you make your presentation so that you can run it to the business, finance teams, marketing teams, sales teams to align on that one single number. So this tool, we said, it will help reduce the time to make these presentations. It will visualize the SNOP. Uh, but there were real challenges in terms of the frequency at which this data was getting updated. It didn't have the flexibility of selecting the SKU or the level of detail which were required for an SNOP discussion. Yeah. So we tried this. We tried it for almost 2 years. There was a lot of money invested in this, but people kept on going back to the previous ways of working in this tool. So eventually then we took a call that we won't move with this particular software going forward, and we weeded it out. So one example of things which were a tool which worked beyond expectation, and another example of tool which didn't work out. I'll also want to share something where it was kind of midway, and this I want to share an example of automations that we have on our factory shop floor, which I've been closely working on for the last year and a half. So in our current operations, we are using robos, we are using cobos, we are also using a lot of palletizers. When they were brought in, let's say they were made live. So a lot of high expectation that there'll be manpower optimization, there'll be higher productivity, they're much safer, they won't take leaves. Yeah, they won't roam around during the coffee breaks or the tea breaks or the lunch breaks. But we actually realized that these machines needed a lot of changes after their installation. To give an example, if the incoming pack was not at the exact angle, it won't even pick it. The palletizer won't pick it. So in the palletizer, there were actually undetected spots where if someone went, the palletizer didn't stop, and it could have resulted into an injury. So it it took months of making these changes. There were OEMs involved, there was integrator involved, and there were people on the shop floor. But after that, I would say it tested our patience. 90% of the automation, worked anywhere between 70% to 100%. I won't say everything worked, 100%. 90% of them worked between 70 to 100% versus their initial business case. And for the rest 10%, we had to actually take a decision and write them off. So, those are the three examples that I wanted to share in my experience, where we had expectation much, where the delivery was much better than expectation. And the second one, in case of SNOP, the delivery was much lower than the expectation. And in terms of automation, it was somewhere midway. So.
Yeah. So in most of the initiatives, what I hear is a lot of mid-course correction is required after you implement, because not everything goes as per the plan. And I'm in fact reminded of Rita McGrath's work on discovery-driven innovation. So as you discover more and more things on the journey after implementation, you keep innovating based on what you have discovered. So is it more like that after going live, you continue to innovate? Innovation doesn't stop when you decide to implement something, but innovation continues as you discover and more and more things, more and more exceptions. What do you think on that?
Yes, and again, you've made something live is not where the effort only is.
Yeah.
It's, your child is growing up and it is in different stages. So, infant, then toddler, then teenager. So you need to take those course correction along the journey before you perfect it and your child is an adult. So it's a journey and it might test your patience, but you need to be invested continuously.
Absolutely. And you learn a lot of useful things after implementation, which you just can't find out before implementation, theoretically. Yeah. What you mentioned about that finance app, that also sounds very interesting. It's really the natural language processing of the data, maybe some sort of a precursor to ChatGPT, which which is for qualitative information. But what you people implemented was for the quantitative information, where queries could be in natural language and the answers could also be in natural language. Tell me, are you also thinking of using any form of chat GPT or similar program, generative AI, in your supply chain?
Yeah, so we are so we are looking at solutions, especially let's say in our the safety domain. So in safety, you have a lot of systems and processes, right? And while you have experts, you might not know everything. In our factory, there are process safety. There are factories, ice cream factories, which require ammonia. So while you can keep on training people, but there are a few things which are basic, which you might not be able to train. This is where something like Chat GPT or generative AI can kind of come in, where depending on the experience of the individual, right, they can answer those questions really handy rather than just being kind of dependent on those few experts. So we are experimenting with those. It's been kind of being tried globally. So right now, that's what we are kind of looking at. The solution that I told you about was still not NLP exactly, because I didn't write what are the sales for Punjab of sanitizers in 2017, but I had to just mention sales, market, Punjab 2017. But I'm sure with the, a lot of work being done on data lake and Azure, these NLPs will also become commonplace.
Correct. Yeah. So what you described was just the keyword based search. Yeah.
Yes.
That's also quite impressive and makes life much easier for people to get data which they want and get it quickly. Okay, just moving on to a new digital initiative where we don't have much data about what type of benefits we would get. We are pioneering something new for the first time. So would you make a are there cases where you'll just make a qualitative business case? In some cases, quantitative to the extent possible with a lot of prediction errors. And do you also see whether this initiative is linked to strategy or not tightly integrated with strategy? So how do you make a business case?
Yeah, so I can give you an example for one of these cases which we were doing on how do you use artificial intelligence. So like you have Tesla, which is autonomous car. Can you have autonomous supply chain where human is out of the loop? The system crawls on multiple sets of data. It understands it, it recommends that data, and then finally also writes back in the system and also kind of corrects. So when we were trying to put a business case for this, there were multiple skills that we were experimenting with. To be honest, it wasn't making business sense because we have people doing this for us. If you just put more number of people, even if I double them, the cost of this particular experiment was much higher. But we said this is something which will definitely kind of be there in future. So if we don't learn it now, it's important for us to learn it now, because once these solutions become commonplace and the cost also reduces over a period of time, we should not be behind the curve. Which is why then we decided to go ahead with that implementation. So the business case in itself was saying, okay, this is going to be more futuristic, or it might not justify in terms of cost, but it is for ensuring we are ready for future by upskilling our people. So that's how we were able to justify sir.
Yeah. So in most of these initiatives, do you define what means success? The success criteria, do you define them upfront?
Yeah, so that needs to be decided because you have multiple stakeholders. So in all in all of them, actually, even if it is a subjective thing, you need to call it out, because if you don't call it out, each of the stakeholder will have a different expectation from that. And then when there are difficult times during post go live or during the implementation, you might not be able to get their buy-in. So you have to ensure you tell them that this is what we are going to achieve, even if you don't have the exact numbers, maybe a range that you give. And these are the boundaries in which you will be playing out with. So it's important to align your stakeholders, because otherwise, if you don't do it, then the same thing, exactly the same implementation, for one person, it's a success. For the other person, it's a failure till you define it.
Absolutely. So absolutely. We need to call it out upfront. And are these criteria different for what you mentioned as experiments and different for scale up?
Yes. So for scale up, you'll have to ensure in short period of time, you're able to deliver your business results, whether it is able to improve your top line, uh, reduce the cost, improvement of your productivity, or bringing down your inventory levels. And for the experimental ones, you might be able to say that while not in near future, but in near future it is experimental, but in long term, if this experiment is successful, instead of the existing projects, which are only giving me a benefit of 5-7%, this can actually give you, a 30-40% reduction or an improvement versus where we are. So a long-term direction still needs to be given, and a short-term experiment is what we can call it out.
Yeah. So again, I'm reminded of Rita Magrath again, who calls such experiments as options, where you spend a little bit of money on options, and then you decide to call that option in case the experiment is successful, and then you get much better returns. And if it doesn't work out, all you have done is lost a little bit of money in options.
Yeah.
Okay. Then finally, I think we should leave about 15 minutes for the question from the audience. Just one last question from my side. There are a lot of young professionals, young graduates, postgraduates who aspire to get into the role of handling and managing digitization and automation. So, what would be your advice to them?
So, my advice to them, and again, I haven't been someone who's been kind of, I've been at I've been someone who've been receiving those solutions. But let's say if you want to be part of automation and digitization, you should keep your eyes and ears open because this is changing at a very fast pace. The tools will keep on changing. The technology will keep on changing. The type of robots will keep on changing. We had, as I mentioned, it was Excel, then we started learning APO, then we started learning random forest models when we were doing machine learning. Then it was talk about artificial intelligence, where we said, it will be a self-autonomous one. Now we are talking about Chat GPT. If I look at an automation space also, it was basic automation like, conveyors kind of helping you. Then BOPTs, MHEs, right? Now you have AGVs. So this space will continue to evolve continuously. But what you need to ensure is, keep yourself abreast with what is happening, in the market. Second, ensure you are giving solutions to a business problem. You're not giving a fancy toy to someone who's just kind of experimenting. It should solve a business problem. And I think the third thing is whenever you're implementing it, ensure you're working with people who have worked with the older solutions because they will be able to give you the real inputs when you're implementing them, real challenges, and also the solutions that come from them. So those are the three inputs from my end.
Oh, that's great. I think this will help all the young professionals quite a bit. So now I think we have about 15 minutes. So Nistush, would you like to moderate the question and answer session if there are some questions from the audience?
Thank you so much for such a nice discussion, first of all. Sir, I am in a windy zone. Am I audible properly?
Okay. Yeah, very clear, very clear.
All right, all right. So I'll take up the session. In case there is any issue, just let me know, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
All right. So I'll take up the question from the audience. This is the first question from Amarjeet. So how did you manage change? Many times there will be a lot of inertia as people don't want to change the way they are working, as they're committed to to a comfort already. New systems means unlearning and learning again. So how do you manage this change?
So I think the I mentioned earlier also the most important and the most difficult bit in all these automation and digitization journeys is getting the people along. So and they will go through their cycle. So they will start initially saying this is just not possible. It might actually take away our own jobs. Take the second stage, when they are actually getting to see that tool, they will start experimenting with. There might be some frustration saying I was much better off working on my old system. Then the third stage where they kind of start engaging, and finally when it starts delivering benefits for them, they start integrating. But I think what is important when you're doing these changes is when the top management is there committed to it, they will ensure that these people, when they're going through this cycle, are being supported, they are being understood. And you can reduce the cycle time by involving people and telling them the why behind the what. So if you tell them that this is how it is not only going to change the business life, or it's a business benefit, but how it is going to make sense for them. I think that's where the first level of engagement comes in, the why behind the what, and telling them that it makes sense for them. The second thing is, when you're doing this, don't just ask experts or outsiders to come and implement a solution for you. Involve your people who've been there for really long, and whom you see as the change agents participating during the design stage itself uh, in these projects. And third bit is when you go live, you should provide all the support. You just cannot have everyone kind of go away once the project is live, take the accolades. You need to support these people when they are facing those real challenges. Because if they continue to use two parallel systems and you're not supporting them, they would eventually go back to the old system. So you need to handhold them during that time. So those are the three main things which is required to ensure that people they shorten their cycle. They will definitely have this in Asia. You just cannot have a perfect world where people say, yeah, we going to implement this solution. Everyone says this is going to work and things will be done. That's not going to be the case. There will be a cycle. You can just shorten it by doing these three things.
Yeah, absolutely right, Ashita. My experience also resonates with this. So generally, what I have seen is a two-step process at least works. Uh, Many times, the outside experts, when they talk to the largest set of people, they get into the how part of it too early. How this is to be done, how their role will change, how the processes would change. I think they miss out on the why part. And
Yes.
it should be a two-step process. Firstly, the why are we changing it, and what's the overall direction of the solution? And then stop there and get alignment of people on just the direction of solution. Once they know that this is the right direction of solution, for example, if you want to move from forecast driven supply chain to a more responsive demand driven supply chain, is the direction right? Does it make sense? If they are not bought into the demand driven supply chain concept, then telling the how is not going to help. Once the direction is aligned, then you get into the how, when everyone is aligned as to how do we make the change happen. So you said absolutely right that it has to be multiple phases of the change management, and you have to carry people all through. Don't move from phase one to phase two too early till people have really thought about it. Phase one, etc. Yeah, I think this question came from Amardeep.
Amarji.
Amarjit, do you have any other
Hope we answered
thoughts?
your question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think
yes, you
agreed.
have actually.
Yeah.
You have. We are actually migrating to S4, right, in SAP. So we are seeing some resistance actually coming from the people, but some is the resistance is not from the lower level of the employees, but somewhere in the middle management. Top management is committed that we want to change. The people at the floor are also quite interested in the change, but the resistance is coming from the middle. So that's a challenge that we are facing, because these are the people that will probably have to influence the floor people that this is the right system, but they are not accepting it yet. so that's why I asked this question, right? How do we change this inertia or this resistance from the middle management actually? But anyway, I think your suggestions are good. So thank you very much. We'll try that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you have answered the question well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Amarjit. Yeah, Nesush,
Thank you
you
so
have
much.
other.
Yeah. So I will take the second question, which is also the last question for today. So this is from Ashif, and there are two questions in one. So first of all, he comments, "That's great, really. That's really great discussion. Sounds insightful." So the first question is, how do you see the risk mitigation plan and supply chain resilience to cope up, especially in Indian markets where uncertainties are behaving very common? And the second one is, uh, blanching technology and human interface seems
I think they're
challenging on
balancing.
special.
I think that's
Yes.
balancing technology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Balancing technology and human interface seems challenging on, especially on grounds operations team. Anyway, how it's impacting the manpower reduction?
So, sir, do you want to go ahead with the first answer, first one? You are much more experienced on this one.
Yeah. So the question is, if we don't make any change, what's the risk? And if we make the change and make our supply chains more resilient, does the risk come down? But the fact remains that the market is going to be more volatile, uncertain, basically more and more of VUCA that's not going to stop. So should we continue to operate the way we are doing? Or should we make our supply chain more in tune with what's happening at the marketplace? And the more we tune our supplies to the demand at the marketplace and do it on a continuous basis, the risk will be lower. Uh, so any resilient supply chain, and in fact, beyond resilient supply chain, the anti-fragile supply chain really benefits from such volatile changes. We don't have time to get into the details, but the real risk is not making any change, not making your supply chain resilient. Continue to operate the way it has always operated, and the risk would be very, very high, including the risk of shutting the business. So I think the making it resilient is mitigating the risk. You want to add something, Ashita?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, and you mentioned VUCA, and now we're also talking about BANI, which is, brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. I think, even as supply chain practitioners, even whatever we plan for, I think there will be things which, we wouldn't be able to solve for. We need to all have, that humility. I was recently in one of the discussions, and there were people, whose industry was impacted because of, these summers not being there in the north this time. They said, and there was someone from Tata Chroma. He mentioned that around April week 2, suddenly there was a day where the orders, the temperatures, went up to around 43 degree. The ask for air conditioners and fridge was so high that we just couldn't meet. But we said, okay, we will try and ramp up our supply chain production. They said we tried to do that, and then after that 43 degree touched for a day, there was no summer for the next 2 months at all. So, and now we are sitting with huge inventories. So I think we will need to ensure that we try and have a responsive supply chain, but also be kind of humble that there will be uncertainties for which we won't have solution. But as long as we keep on learning, moving forward, I think we'll be better every day.
Yeah, Ashita. And basically, there are three types of getting into a bit more technical. There are three types of latency involved here. First is the demand latency. When the demand has actually surfaced, how soon do we recognize? Are we listening to what's happening at the marketplace? If you delay that listening part, for example, if you compile that data only on a weekly or a monthly basis, discuss only in S&OP, then there's too much of demand latency. You have lost the game there. Whereas if you listen to the market on a daily basis, look at how the demand is shaping up, then the demand latency is low. So that comes really with a very sharp demand sensing engine, which listens to the demand and makes very near-term predictions, whether summer will continue or summer will go away. And next day, the predictions will change that now the summer is unlikely to come. So have you listened to that? Because then the maximum inventory and hand should be 1 day's production. You couldn't have produced more than 1 day's production. But if you don't listen to the next day's forecast of weather, then you would continue to produce. So that's the demand latency. The second is planning latency. Once you understood that the demand is shifting, how long do you take to revise the plan? And there's a lot of resistance in people to make any changes to the S&OP plan. A lot of resistance. They just resist any forecast changes, any production plan changes, any procurement plan changes. So the planning latency is also high. And the third is the execution or the action latency. After changing the plan, how soon can you execute? And if all these three are high, then you won't be able to manage in a VUCA world. But our job as supply chain professionals is to keep reducing each of these three latencies. Obviously, you can't come down to a zero latency, but wherever we are, how do we minimize the demand latency, the planning latency, and the action latency? And that's really making the supply chain more resilient. Similar to this air conditioner thing, I'm reminded of remdesivir during the COVID, where the demand for remdesivir during the second wave went through the roof. And just think of the pharmaceutical companies which make it. And if you get deeper, some of those companies freeze their production plan for as long as 3 months. So the earliest they could schedule the production was in the month 4. And the whole wave lasted for less than 2 months or 3 months.
Yes.
So by the time they could produce, the demand was over. So if the latency is that high that you take 3 months to respond to the demand in terms of just production, then you can't stay in the game. You have to be much more resilient. And similar latencies play out in almost every industry. And then people crave that the market has become more volatile. They never say that we are not as responsive as we should be. I think we should always turn the market volatility to say that we are not flexible, we are not responsive, we are not listening to the demand, rather than cribbing about the market being uncertain and volatile. So that was, in short, a lot of theoretical inputs which need to be
No, but
converted
beautifully
into
put
practice.
and summarized. I remember as a demand planner, whenever my forecast used to be off, I
Yeah.
used to tell the supply planner, agility trumps forecasting.
Yes, absolutely. And also for stockouts, I heard a lot of stories that there was overselling, and that's why we were stocked out. Salespeople oversold, or they were underselling, so we are sitting with excess stock. This is a normal, I would say, crib. So we should ban these two words, overselling and underselling. Overselling is nothing but under forecasting.
Exactly.
So we have made the forecast, we have made the plan, we haven't planned for what the real demand is. So it's always the blame should lie with us, that we
Yes.
have either not forecast properly or not adjusted the forecast in time or
Forecast.
not taken action based on the adjusted forecast. Similarly, underselling, nothing like underselling. It's over forecasting that we have done. And we have not reduced the forecast in time or not acted in cutting down the production or procurement. So it's always, I think the supply chain team should take the responsibility. And I also remember responsibility leads to responsibility. If you want to develop your ability to respond, then you must take responsibility. So, and unless you take responsibility and shift the blame to salespeople for underselling or overselling, the supply chains can't improve. So, anyway, so
Completely agree. And I think that's what a planner kind of goes through every day, but beautifully put.
okay. So, does it answer your question? Hello,
I think
I'm not
Ashif.
sure if he's there.
Asha.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
Okay.
definitely answers the question. So, so if audience, if we have more questions, feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and speak up. We'll wait for another 15 seconds or so, and then if you do not have more questions, Rakesh, we can move towards the closing of the session.
Yeah. So, yeah, while you wait for the question, thanks a lot, Ashita, for very insightful deliberation on your digitization and automation journey, and the anecdotes, the examples that you gave. I think it has added a lot of value. Yeah, who is part of this forum, and the recordings will also be posted by SCPC, so it will be available for people to view. So thanks once again, Ashita, and wish you all the best in your role as the site unit director, and we hope that you flourish in your role. Uh, Thank you, and
Thank
thanks
you,
to the
sir.
yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I think amazing discussion. I think your anecdote. I think someone is just. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes,
I think
no
there's some thing where someone is just putting it on mute all. But thank you very much. Thanks for giving your time, sir. And thank you very much. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks to the audience for the amazing questions and tuning into this platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you, thank
Ashita
you,
from SCPC.
thank you, Dr. Rakesh, for hosting this, and thank you, Ashita ma'am, for taking your time and being here with us. Thanks to everyone, and have a great weekend. Stay tuned to SCPC pages for the next episodes on Fireside Chat. Thank you, everyone.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care.